only scientific papers use this repetition, also product design. So this is something that does something good for your hair. If you have a look closely, it is repeating once, twice, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times. Small space like this. This product, I actually usually don't notice. You just have it in the effect. But they use the same idea. You have a product in this tiny area. They repeat 6 or 7 times as a message that this product is repairing your hair. So it's really not so easy to see from the distance. So it's about hair repair, 70% less damage, repair complex, deep repair, scan repair complex, total repair, direct repair, depth repair. And if you see this, you start, oh, this is silly. And it works. You usually don't notice. Subconsciously, the message in your head is, this is really good, it does a job. And that's something we now notice with these pet publications. When we now study them for language and words, we will see, God, is that not too much? So this is repetition, etc. So it's then at the element of dosage. So it's the right level. You need to repeat things, vary the message ever so slightly, but also not overdo it. That's also a risk of overdoing it. I mean, just a bit too often, strikingly. If at all, maybe once or so. Not going over the top. Okay, that is something I wanted to share. And let's see what is this. These are the just repeating my top tips. Trying to do this routine. If we will do this now, which we may do in the future, then maybe on the internet over 7 weeks. We have once a week 90 minutes. We do this throughout the semester. Then we would read 1 or 2 papers a week for the structure, not for the content of the language. You do just the marking. And you do this, and after a while, it will get very boring and repetitive. But the advantage of that is that you will remember. Keep your phrase book, learn how to review publications. Some people here, I met with a great hat already in this experience of reviewing papers, and stick to the 5 questions. So let's have a look at these questions. So the first question was, what is the context? Describe the background to your work. The second question, which is often also the second sentence, or the second half of the first sentence, what's the focus? Policy, research cap, problem addressed. And that is a place where these words appear as, however, something remains unclear, it remains a challenge, something is unknown, and so forth. So this is where you make it interesting and exciting. Then you become technical. Then you say what has been done. If it's a research proposal, you say what will be done. Next is what has been done as a result. What has come out of it? What did you find? And in the text, this is often separated from the discussion, quite important. If you have your plots, you have done your experiment. It's a very good idea to separate the description of what has come out. It's just describing what you see in the plots, neutral description. And the commenting, the interpretation, deep down to a separate section, like in the discussion or so. Because I've had this several times that people, the reviewer, may not agree with the interpretation of the results, that the experiments or all the work that led to the may still be something that's acknowledged by the reviewer. So the reviewer may say, well, I'm not sure whether I would interpret it this way, but the experiments are done in a good way. So it's a good idea to separate the description of the result, plots. You say something went up or down, without necessarily saying what the consequences of this. This is what we move into the discussion section. Okay, and then at the end, this was very important. You notice that you place this off at the end of the paragraph. What is the value? Okay. This is the abstract of the paper we just looked at. You can see that these 5 questions are answered in there. The first sentence is about the background. The next sentence is about the motivation. Then comes the focus, what in particular is dealt with, what's being done, the results, and the consequences. It will never be exact. There will always be variations. And of course, the rules are there to be adopted and varied by yourself. Now, having done this for half a year, I had my course ready, and then I found that the journals themselves, if you go on the website of the journals, some of these journals provide excellent tutorials and material before the authors. I never had this idea to look for advice on the web pages of the journals. In one case, I was actually quite frustrated, but at the same time very happy, because on Nature, one of the top journals on the journals, they suggest this. If you read this, it is from 2005. It's more or less exactly what I told you about the question. So, and maybe because they expected many people to follow that. So 1 or 2 sentences, so Nature says if you submit a paper, 1 or 2 sentences should provide a basic introduction to the field, comprehensible to the scientist in any discipline. That's what I said, that the first part and the last part should be not too technical. Then 2 or 3 sentences of more detailed background, comprehensible to scientists in a related discipline. And this will be in my pattern, the identifying the research gap. 1 sentence clearly stating the general problem being addressed. Okay, this is identifying the research gap. 1 sentence summarizing the main result. Here we show, 2 or 3 sentences explaining what the main result reveals in direct comparison to what was thought to be the case previously, or how the main result adds to previous knowledge. So that's basically saying what has come out. But what they say is we should take it also in comparison to other or previous work, which I think is a good idea. And then you have 1 or 2 sentences that put the results into a more general context. So that is what I suggest is the last question. What is the value? They then say, having 2 or 3 more sentences to provide a broader perspective. So in total, they have here 5 sentences. 5 sentences covering the last question. Okay, so if you follow that advice, that pattern, you can't do much wrong. You will be well within the scope of what many is the most. Oh, there it is. Okay. Let me see. I wanted to give you a tip for something to read up. Mark Twain said the secret of getting ahead is getting started. And of course, this is the big thing. You get these papers if you start writing them. Okay, so let's see. I will jump over this. Because I would like to have questions from your side, and then I can anyway, if there's something that fits, I could jump back to it. So I have things here like a covering letter, how to write a covering letter. So this is the one I would like to make. So this is from 1990, it's freely available. If you Google for it on the internet, you can download the PDF. An American scientist. It's a study by Open and Swan. It's a science of scientific writing. It's not, it took me 2 reads before I really understood what they were going on about. The key idea is that the reader expects things in certain positions. Basically, the stress position and the topic position. And very often the topic position is the start of a sentence or the start of a paragraph, and the stress position, where you put the emphasis, is at the end. They work this out in much more detail. I would highly recommend it. Because even having something like a title, you can have a title with something at the beginning or at the end. And you think that doesn't make any difference. And it does. Because they studies, you can study how leaders also interpret tests. It makes a difference when you place things. Also revelation for me. So I would recommend this as well. I think with this, I would like now invite you to ask questions. Let me see if there's anything else on. Maybe only something. If you are now worried, no? I mean, quite a few here I can see will have quite a bit of experience, but still, if you're worried now, okay, there's so many things to learn. Remember what I said at the beginning, because it's exactly the same situation I'm still in all those years. Exactly in your position. The only way to improve is by keep doing it. It's for me something that is very odd that in science you learn only with having gray hair, less hair on your head. You learn these things that what is really important. For all those years I thought what is important is now how to do your math very well. And now I know I'm on various panels, advisory bodies, I'm on the German Research Foundation, I'm on the panel that decides on how the money is spent. We're not doing the reviews of proposals, we are doing the reviews of the reviews. So a proposal is being reviewed by people, and we are sitting there and then deciding on the reviews and whether this is fair, etc., etc. And what I learned there is always this same thing. It's very difficult for people who make the decisions. They will usually not be the in-depth experts of what you're writing. So they will base their decision not really on the numbers and figures. They will make a decision on the impressions they have, on the story being told, and the presentation of their work. We may not like this as scientists. We may say, well, this is all about data and experiments, it's about truth and not truth. It's not about how I present it. The data should speak for themselves. Unfortunately, you first have to submit this thing to a journal where there sits an editor. You haven't got a clue what this job or background of the editor is. And he will read the abstract and may decide whether it suits the scope of the journal, whether it's at all of interest or of sufficient quality. But before it gets to an expert from the field, you have to take that into. And then, of course, that expert may be very busy and may not actually be very exciting and spend 3 years on this, but he may not have the time to spend 3 days on understanding what you did in three years. He may only spend an hour or so, and he may only spend a few minutes, or 2 minutes on the abstract and decide about the abstract. So whether we like it or not, unfortunately, communication of the results is as important than the actual work. I find it personally frustrating. I always thought science is not about graduate or stuff like that. But I'm learning that the hard way myself. No? So I would encourage you just keep going and showing perseverance. And with this, I would be very happy if we now have a bit more of an interactive session that either share your experience with journals, writing or communication, oral communication, posters, papers, etc., or that you ask general questions. Go ahead.
Sir, like to know one thing, like how we can understand the patterns, how we can identify patterns. The thing is, we are reading a lot of things. Okay, making sense of those things. Sometimes, sometimes we understand the thing, but the thing is, we interpret in a wrong manner. So, how we can avoid those things and how we can make more, what we can say, better pattern recognition. How we can make it better.
What you mean now is understanding the scientific part of the paper, not the language. No? You meaning now the how do I get you right?
Yes, sir. Actually, the thing is like how we can understand the paper. The thing I am asking, like how we can make it a pattern out of the context.
Yeah, but remember, what we now talk about is reading a paper not for the content,
Yes, sir.
but for the language.
Yes.
But the only way I can recommend for language is because there is no just reading, and I go very quickly. I just mark everything quickly with an edit, really quickly, and then after some time, the pattern emerges automatically. Suddenly you see that these words are used all the time. Suddenly, by noting them down, you realize, oh, this word, this is a variation of the same. I will share my phrase book with you. Then initially, I just gathered them all in a long list, and then I started to sort them. And I realized, oh, these are all nice phrases that I could use for raising interest. This is all nice phrases I could use for the last question. So I categorize this.
Yes, sir, because we have studied a lot of papers and we have gone through these things. But when you have shown like this is the thing, so subconsciously we have studied it, but we were not aware of those things. So that's the thing.
Neither was I. I was also not aware of this pattern. And now looking at the paper that way, I hope you have the same effect like me. You look before it says it again and again. Always the last sentence is sort of saying this, no? Then you write a paper, you just write what comes to you, or write not what just comes to your head, but you want to have a flow.
Yes.
You don't want to sit all the time there, stop and thinking, oh, you just want to write, you want to have a flow into the thing. And that's probably not the best way. You need to stop and reflect. And print out. Also, an interesting phenomenon. You can look 10 times at the computer screen, and it looks all fine. You print it out, and as the paper comes out, you print it out there. You can see that. So there's something to looking at something in paper compared to. Any more questions? Any questions?
So my question is, so it is necessary to write a scientific research paper? It is necessary to write difficult grammar or difficult languages? Yes,
No, not difficult, but beautiful. This is my goal. Actually, it should be simple language, precise language, short sentences. Germans have a tendency to have very long sentences, nested sentences. My favorite philosophers are the Schopenhauer, and if you look at the English translation, it's a lot shorter than the German, and the translator commented on that Schopenhauer sometimes half a page, one sentence, is sort of nested sentences. Very difficult. So short sentence, concise sentences, being concise is very important. Don't make, if the sentence with a comma can be split up, let us split it up. So it's simple. My ambition is, as a non-native speaker, I would also like to write beautiful. I'm not there. Who of you is there? My guess is that most of us here are not there. They're not this natural talent. And by the way, if you think, oh, well, there are others who are much better. Actually, if you speak to the editors of German publishers, they tell you that the best papers and the best writers, for them, it does not come naturally. I always thought these guys are just doing it like that, and they don't have to think about it. Not true. I have also a slide on that. There was an article, again, I think it was Nature, where they asked the editors to summarize their decades of experience when they look at hundreds of papers, etc., and communicating with the authors. It turns out that these guys are also going through an enormous number of versions of it. You are starting with your word file, ending 00 for version 0, and then don't be surprised to go into 2 figures, yeah, to have a dozen versions. That's normal. Now, when someone writes up a PhD thesis, I always ask them to first have bullet points, summaries of the chapters, so that we can first organize the structure of the dissertation. And then they are frustrated if they have to come to me 3 times to go through. They say, no, I say, no, don't worry, that's normal. Sometimes we change 10 times the structure of the thesis. Hardly ever had this that it was the first one. And don't don't think that there are people out there who do this all right away. So in this essay in the Nature, they said no. The best writers are working very hard, and they see it as a process that never ends. By themselves, that's really also the key to success. That you get, in the moment you assume you are someone, you are there, you're good at something, you have stopped becoming good at something. So I think that's also important to understand. Yeah, so I wouldn't say complicated, not overcomplicating it, to make it concise. And beautiful is, of course, difficult for non-native speakers. Say it again.
Or they do it for free so that it is not biased. And is there a hierarchy?
Is there a
Hierarchy.
hierarchy? Yeah, so first question, are they, sometimes the editors are, so I founded also a journal, international journal, was the first in the interdisciplinary area. I was not very keen to do it, and I was risky to do it, and my colleague from Korea, he took over and did the actual work. Because this publishing business, there are also many problems with it. It has so many journals, it has become a big business. I think in our group, in the group of, I don't know, 12 people or so, we probably spent this year 9 or 10,000 euros just on conference. Multiply this by 70 to get this in movies. A lot of money to publish it in the top journals, the open access journals. And they say open access is good. Everyone can read these papers. It's free to read them. Yeah, not everyone can publish the paper because not everyone can afford $2,000 to pay the papers. So for me, this open access thing is not that wonderful. I mean, clearly it should be free. In Germany, for example, they are now trying to change the system because in a way the taxpayer pays these magazines a lot of money, the publishers, and they don't pay the reviewers. The reviewers do it for free. And usually you do it because in an idealistic way, sometimes it's you, sometimes it's your colleagues, so it's a contribution to the community. But also you hope, of course, that if you do a good job, that they may do a good job. As a reviewers are usually not paid. As a reviewer, I'm paid regularly for doing grant reviews. So yesterday I got an email from the government of Cyprus to review a proposal, and they give you a small amount of money. But that doesn't influence your views. I don't think that the money is something problematic. The hierarchy, I'm not sure, but I get a lot of requests for reviews for things where I'm actually not an expert. These people think I'm somehow noticeable or I have a name, but I mean it's stupid. I'm not really the right person. And the problem is they don't see the names of the actual experts. So that's the problem. No, so that when I pass it on, Gupta is in many things where I get the request. It's actually the real expert. No, I tell the journalists, you just does it. My name, that's the topic. And yeah, so the hierarchy, of course, there can be in the field people who are very dominant, and this can also happen. People in the field will try not to have your work published. We had the experience, we found errors in the paper. So we were trying to recreate something. And after 4 months, we realized it's not our problem understanding it. The paper had an error. And we found that the journals were not happy to hear about this. They didn't want to publish this. And also the authors were not happy to hear this. I thought they may be happy to hear that we use their work and try to recreate it. And finding an error or something is also good. That's how science works. Who does everything perfect? That's also.
Just to go further down the line, what you say, how do do you review a reviewer?
So how do you
Review, say that you are on a panel that reviews the
Yeah.
person that reviews the paper.
now very tough? That's a huge responsibility. I now am a lot more conscious of myself reviewing them. So to have on this panel, let's see, this is like the top funding in Germany now. So the applications coming in there, they're usually, we meet, I don't know, often a year, we spend 64 million euros. My group, that's on one panel, many panels, it's the Foundations of Medicine and Oncology, including all interdisciplinary topics. And we will spend, on 2 days, we'll be roughly spending 6 to 7 million euros, 70, and there are usually more good proposals than there's money. So the success rate is 30 to 40%. In some European funding schemes, it's only 3 to 5%. That can be really frustrating. So you make all the effort, and then the chance is only 4 or 5%. So why do I say this? Because now I realize how important the reviewing is. Because in the past, I thought if I like a project, I would still to make suggestions for improvements and stuff like that. But the risk is, if that happens, is that this will, even though I consider it an excellent paper, the moment you put some sentences in that are critical, they may not have a chance when it comes to the end. If there's a lot more good proposals than money, people will select. How do they select? You just look at the reviews. Is there anything negative? So when I review things now, I make up my mind. Selling a paper, if some goes up or down, and if I make my mind up that this is good, then I'm positive. I'm not anymore starting, oh, this could be, maybe this. I now think this grant is interesting science, then I support it. I don't anymore start making suggestions. This is one of the things I learned from that panel. Because you can see the reviewers, and some reviewers are only positive, others negative. The problem is those guys who say, this proposal is really good, it's excellent, but this decision at the end of the secondary is bad, kills it. Even though it was a very good proposal. So our job on the panel is to filter that out, to filter out how reviewers take, and whether they are fair or unfair. We have also sometimes people who are competitive, and they are negative, and we notice this, we spot this, that they are only negative not because they agree with it, because it's a competitor or something like this. So you, after you do it many times, you get the sense. But I can tell you, on the German Research Foundation panel is one of many panels I've been on, and a huge effort. So we really, it's all in the interest of the scientists. I had before quite negative, some prejudices against this panel myself. Because I was always successful there, and the response I get to why I fail is often very blurry, and I always complain. Why do they make it more precise so that I can improve? If you get these vague statements, why you take us not accepted, you have no chance to improve. And so I was quite critical, but now I can see that really as technical developers, can you pass on the microphone?
My question is, what is the significance of using the impact factor? Because every journals are having their impact factor. We could not find out which one is the best journal or which one is the bad one.
Yeah. So to begin with, of course, you have to ask the question, where do I submit my paper to? No? And nowadays, this question is often answered by you first try to see highest impact factor. You try to get your thing published in the journals of high impact factor. But actually, you may first, so it often happens that papers are rejected. Someone here shared this experience with me, that often papers are rejected because they are out of scope of the journal. Right? So one attempt to find out where should I submit, if you have, in the introduction, you have to refer to the previous work on which you built. Then you make references to the literature. And these journals are also, of course, any potential targets for your submission. Journals like that, if you refer to papers in their issue, it's not that they like it that you cite their journal, they don't care. it means, it automatically implies, if you refer to papers in their journal, that it is relevant, that you're within the context of the scope, as I call it, of the paper. Now, coming to the impact factor, this has become, unfortunately, very dominant. We have been lucky in engineering, and doesn't matter too much. Some of the top engineering journals have an impact factor of 0 point or 1 point. If you are working in a medical faculty, people will not even bother to consider your publication if it's below 10, so 8 or 5. And this is a big problem for us working in interdisciplinary stuff. Because when we work with people from the experimental sciences, if we submit something in really good journals, interdisciplinary journals, the impact factor may be 4 or 5. This would be really good. But in their faculty, when they put this publication in their list in their faculty, that faculty says no. And that is, of course, the cultural difference in citations. No? So in clinical and biological papers, the introduction section is full of references, and the other extreme are mathematical sciences. They may have only 1 or 2 or 3, a handful of references. And the impact factors are largely determined by citations, and therefore there's a bias. So it's a big problem. Also, it's very frustrating for, I think, for promotions in universities. Now people look at the H index. Imagine this. We signed, have you heard of, who has not heard of the H index? So the Hirsch index is a number that is calculated by the number of the Hirsch index is the number of papers that have been, so if your H index is N, you have published N papers that have been cited at least N times. Sounds like a really good idea to summarize how productive someone is. No? So if you have as a young scientist, an H index of around 10, very good. Senior scientist between 20 and 30. And if you're in the medical experimental field, you will be somewhere 40 or something. If you're really exceptionally good. But again, that measure has many faults. There's H bias in there and then. But I've been on many panels where it's about promotion of people, and you're reduced to a figure. I mean, how sad is this? We as scientists, with what we do, are reduced to a single number. That's the same as selling some vacuum cleaners, and at the end of the month, you have a number. You have sold 10, you have sold 20, or 25. Right? And these scientists have accepted we are now reduced to a single number every month or every year. You can check your H index and see. So there are reference databases where you can look yourself up, and then you can see your number. You can look my number up, and so forth. That these numbers have big focus because the disciplines are very different. Each discipline has different cultures and citations. There's H bias and that. So it's all sorts of problems with these things. What's the question?
Sir, what is the right method to get the plagiarism while writing the research paper? What should be the best method to get the plagiarism?
So plagiarism is just stealing things, right? Should not do that. But there's one part of your paper where I would recommend, not plagiarism, of course not, but there is one section where I would urge you to stay as close as possible to the original wording of the other author. So some people are so scared of plagiarism that they avoid, they reformulate. So then you have to do the introduction, for example. You have to describe the state of the art and what previous work, right? And you may have lots of references. In the introduction, you have sentence reference. You should never have a sentence in 5 references or 10. Usually it's sentence, statement, reference, next. No? Now, and some of my students, in order not to be falling under stealing things, they feel they have to rewrite or reinvent. And I think that's a mistake. In that part, because I put the sentence, I almost take it identically from what the author said. How they describe the result. And then I put the reference right away behind this. And then it's not speaking, then it's actually almost like quoting. Often you cannot quote directly because they write it in a different tense and you need to slightly rephrase the sentence. But there I stay as close as possible to the original. But otherwise, plagiarism is just you stealing the result. You can't do that. You produce your own results. What I discussed here is just words, learning how to formulate things. You can do the same thing by dozens of books on scientific writing. You may as well read those. I only found that this method is more effective because these books, I have 10 of them by now. They're all on the shelf gathering dust. I'm not getting up to look them. Is this a reasonable answer? You're still not happy? Did I understand you properly? Or? Okay. Any other questions? How about this? That's true.
What is the value and the impact part? How the impact, the value differentiate in the research papers, right? The impact of those research is more valuable for the market, but that research papers went on the only for publication, not into the actual practice. This gap how we can minimize.
Okay, so you're suggesting that impact means always an economic impact, or?
The solution the researcher gave were publication. So how we can actually make that into practice?
Okay, well, yeah, so this is interesting because the last sentence would suggest what is the value of this for industry, for an application. So you may present some basic research and then you have to guess what is the value of this for real world problems, etc. Very good question and very difficult because you shouldn't make too many claims for what we do. Mostly is, I mean, our goal is to make real world applications. I mean, we want to have patients in the clinic, we want to develop tools that are being sold, we advise industry to improve their products and stuff like that. That's clearly our goal. But a lot of the things we do are only a tiny part towards this goal. And we wouldn't claim that our results have the impact of making more money, saving lives. That would be over the top because we're only one piece of the chain. So impact can also mean that you change the way people think. So if you change, if you improve the understanding of something, that is going to also impact, invaluable impact. It's not only in industrial application that someone actually implements it and uses it. I think also understanding. Often you can only develop things in practice if you have a better understanding of things. But in medicine, that's at the moment what we try to do. We try to understand the human body in terms of its molecular and cellular biology, and we hope that this will help develop better medicines and therapies. But to claim in a paper that this will save lives would be then the extreme stretch of claiming the full impact. As I alluded to, I find this impact thing difficult. In Europe, this word didn't appear 10 years ago. We were not asked to describe the impact of the work. And not with the economic situation and governments wanting research to be of more use, there is this pressure on us to think about that. Thinking about it is fair enough. Promising too much is maybe not good, especially I know colleagues in mathematics who do very good in my group, very important research, but there's no way this stuff is not immediately applicable or usable by anyone. It's still contribution to knowledge. There's still an impact on their field, on their discipline. Impact doesn't always mean outside your own domain, outside the university. But that's difficult to do. But remember, the last sentence is also the opportunity to close your abstract like we started in a more general term. So that in the technical part of the middle, similar with the introduction gets very technical. It's a good idea towards the end of the introduction, the last paragraph, come back and make it more digestible and more general. Don't get the reader to read on. And if you get walked down into ever more detailed introduction, you end this going to be very technical. You tire the reader, and you will start fresh with the next paragraph and motivate him for that. So it's the impact thing is also just a way to zoom out to be a bit more general and definitely understandable. Yeah. Some of them they want to go industry or go for business. And the art more likely to certificate. You also need to know like how to write a CV, how to present themselves effectively, so that the CV will stay on the table of the professor. It will be eventually not go. So, can you just like how to present yourself? Yeah, so I'm afraid when it comes to CVs, I haven't found many patterns yet. That will be the next course. Let me work on that for next year. Very difficult. From India, many CVs are often individual presentation, maybe not so timely. You know, when you compare German roads to Indian roads, here the roads are a lot more dusty and bumpy and that. And in Germany or Switzerland, actually, Germany compared to Switzerland is a joke. Huh? So in Switzerland, everything is ever so tidy and orderly. Huh? So when you choose your fonts properly, you make everything nicely in line, tiny things like this, which are for the eye, which are maybe not the essence of your CV. May sound silly, but having a consistent font, having things nicely structured in the mind are small things that matter for the person to think. That person paid attention to how he made the layout and the structure of the CV. He is generally a very detailed, conscientious person who makes an extra effort to make things nice. So the presentation thing. The other thing about the Indian culture, I already said earlier, Germans tend to be, German CVs are sometimes the opposite of an Indian CV. Germans tend to be too dry and too thin. They're not making an effort to sell themselves. So in the US, in the UK, and also in India, you put in the CV also other activities you have done. You're engaged in some student society and stuff like that. Germans will forget writing this in the CV. Often the CV is only half a page, like where they went to school and that's it. It's very simple. And that is also normal. They have a problem in the US. No? So some of the Indian CVs go a bit over the top. No? So they're like more TV like advertisement. You think, well, they are applying for a PhD, but they're suggesting they have already published so many things and have done so many things that sometimes we had an applicant for a PhD position claimed he had 70 publications already. You know, most of my PhD students need 2 or 3 years to get a publication. And this guy hasn't even started his PhD, but he already describes 70 publications. And we go into details, and he has been talking to this society and that society, and that was for him a PhD. So finding the balance of confident, but also modest presentation is very difficult. I honestly don't know how to do that best. When I see a CV, I have a feeling whether it's good or bad, but I couldn't show you that. I have now some, I'm starting to collect. I get this question from my group, of course, as well. When they are done with a PhD, they want to move on. They ask me, they come with their CV to me. But now I'm starting to collect CVs. So maybe I will be able to discover also patterns. But I think it's very difficult because everyone is different. So the CVs will also vary. But this is maybe the advice I will give on CVs, on writing them. What else in terms of CVs? I would not say I'm interested in exactly what you do. You should also, often in CVs people say in every lot of detail what they are interested in. And often I don't, so we get into colleague from India in the next few weeks, he's also a scientist, and Satoshi from Calcutta, and he had quite a good study, and he just appeared generally a good student. And so we approached him now on a project, which I'm pretty sure he had not at all understood. Well, actually, I just came to mind. We didn't advertise. He made an initiative application. Just approached us. Said, I would like to work with you. And then we said, oh, come along and visit us, give a presentation, which he did. And then it happened, we had a project. Now he's working. But if he had written an application where he says in every detail, I'm interested in metabolic engineering of this and this, and I want to develop applications for this and this, to find a project where that fits may be difficult. And often the funding, and the good thing about the things you have, your degrees here from this university, you can switch disciplines. I mean, I'm an electrical engineer, and I've been offered a position in medicine, professor in medicine. I had a position as a senior lecturer in a biomedical science, a biomolecular sciences department. So it is possible to switch disciplines. You can bring your experience from one field, something to the other field. This is, I think, the recipe for success in our group, that we have people with very different backgrounds. And they work together on problems. Therefore, bring into the project a different perspective. So I would focus in the CV on describing the generic skills, and what type of methodologies you're familiar with. In general terms, which could also be maybe transferred. You may have done machine learning. Rather than saying, I've learned to analyze traffic signs, you say, I've learned machine learning. So you generalize what you did, so that you are more broadly explained, which you are. So I see that can be. So good questions. Make me think. Anything else? Getting tired.
Is the only chance to ask questions, and whatever comes in your mind is asked.
But we are also around for a few days, so
It's not
always going to be. I thought the concept of this is quite different. Most of you are not actually based here, so it's this college is a different concept. So in Rostock, everything is in town. You can reach everything within almost walking distance on a bicycle, and in 10-15 minutes you are any part of the campus that you want to get to. No, okay. Then are we done? Or what's our time schedule?
So some students they want to be across mobile application. So what will mobile application? Say some students they want mobile application.
I check.
So can then discuss something about the window. That's it.
No.
Five minutes.
But there will be people who will not be interested. Should we let them leave?
Yeah,
And those who are interested in mobile applications stay or not? As you decide.
I don't know.
I should